Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Legacy Guard. This is Draco Argentum, along with Taurus
Hello, hello.
and Porglord.
Good afternoon.
And we are here today to talk to you all about the Tolkien animated universe. That is the Tolkien property that was presented in a video format, animated in both The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, and the Return of the King. So, gentlemen, we all had the opportunity to view these properties over the weekend. Taurus, what were your first impressions? When did you first have the opportunity to watch these properties?
So I read The Hobbit when I was about 10 years old, and I had at that time not seen the Rankin Bass production. But shortly thereafter, reading the book, I saw it. I think my grandmother had taped it from TV or something. I had a VHS copy. But that was a really good adaptation. I really enjoyed it growing up. I thought it was very faithful. Watching it again yesterday, Porgalord made the comment that it was more like Hobbit the musical, which it certainly. If you read the book, there are a lot of songs in the book, a lot of um, poetry type songs, and they didn't miss any opportunities. I will tell you that. But watching it again, it's 78 minutes. So, you talk about Peter Jackson's travesty that he created with the three movies. This one felt a little truncated to me. All the scenes kind of felt a little rushed and a little bit short, and there was a bit much on the singing. But I love that old Rankin Bass animation style, and that version of Smeagol was Smeagol to me, or Gollum to me, until Andy Serkis came in and motion captured our hearts. But I think overall, it for what it was in 1977, an adaptation of The Hobbit, I think it was for a children's program. I thought they did a damn fine job of it. Um, I think it stands up today as a pretty decent adaptation. What do you think, Porglord?
I think overall, I definitely enjoyed it. This was actually my first time to sit down and watch it all the way through. I think I'd kind of seen clips of it over the years, along with some of the Lord of the Rings clips too. Way too much singing for my tastes. That they could have skipped over that part and gave me a little bit more of the actual story. But I felt like it definitely was a little bit more truer to the book than yeah, the Peter Jackson version of it. I thought the animation was pretty good. The only thing that it kind of bothered me was just how they had the dwarfs drawn. They felt a little too garden gnomey to me. Being a fan of dwarves in any kind of genre or game, um, I, I I didn't like that. They just were like garden gnomes. I think that's part of the reason they sang all the time was because they were actually garden gnomes in reality and just pretended to call themselves dwarves.
That's
Are
a good point. I agree with that. I think they were a little too gnomey.
are you saying that they cast garden gnomes in the position of dwarves, and that they should
Yeah,
have cast actual dwarves in this
yeah.
position?
I don't know if maybe it was a budget issue that they could get garden gnomes cheaper than actual paying real dwarves. That might have been part of it. Um,
We'll have to talk with the animators to find out if they're still alive. So
I've already got an email out. We'll have a video on that next week.
sure.
What'd you think of it, Draco? I know you kind of caught the last piece.
Well, similar to you, Taurus, I first read The Hobbit when I was 10, and I had the Alan Lee version of The Hobbit. So it had some illustrated pages of
Yeah.
so this was my first version of Gollum and Smeagol. So
Yeah.
the frog looking Smeagol was new to me completely. As the first time I'd seen a Gollum in that particular form and fashion. But I thought that the animation style was good. I enjoyed it. I did share some of the disappointment with the description of the dwarves. Even in the Tolkien verse, dwarves were seen as very hale creatures. They were bigger than the
Hmm.
Hobbit. whereas it seemed in some cases almost as if the Hobbit in this animated version was bigger than the dwarves.
Mm-hmm.
So, the majority of it that I saw seemed very loyal to the original book. There were a few things that were left out for the purpose of time. Um, I honestly say that I like that version right now better than the Peter Jackson version, because Peter Jackson's version should have at most been two movies. So you've got 3.5 hours of extraneous material
Mm-hmm.
that probably should never have been input into the Peter Jackson's work.
Yeah, and as you guys know, my boys and I just finished reading The Hobbit, and we're watching the Peter Jackson movies. And my God, is it bad in some places? Now there are some things that were added that I really have enjoyed, like Gandalf going to Dol Guldur and some of that stuff. But man, the love story with Keeley and Toriel, and all that business, and then Bard's family and all the the Master of Lake Town. Well, we're not talking about those movies. We'll be here all day. Um, but yeah, I agree. I think the animated version is actually a better version than Peter Jackson's trilogy.
So let's move on to The Lord of the Rings. The Lord of the Rings, it seemed to me that it covered the entirety of the Fellowship of the Rings, which was the first book of The Lord of the Rings, and it almost stretched into the first third of the Two Towers as well. Taurus, what were your thoughts on The Lord of the Rings?
Lord of the Rings, I saw that Ralph Bakshi version, which came out in 1978. I saw that probably when I was 11. I was real hungry for a sequel. My grandmother also had, I think, taped it, and so I actually watched that before I read Lord of the Rings, and immediately went out and read Lord of the Rings afterward, because it leaves you hanging. You're like, what happens to these guys? Because it stops, like you said, about a third of the way into the Two Towers. You get Helm's Deep, and then you get the hobbits kind of right before they go into Mordor, and then it's just over. So that's kind of what led me to go pick up Lord of the Rings and read it, was to find out what the heck happened. I was unaware that there was an animated Return of the King, but I've always loved that version. I'm very fond of it. The animation is very bizarre. How it kind of goes from live action with animation over it. I think they call it rotoscoping, to then kind of straight animation. But as an adaptation, it's pretty loyal. I think the Fellowship of the Ring is my favorite book of the trilogy, and that's mostly what's covered. I think they did a wonderful job with it. It's very true to the book, and I think aside from the odd animation jump backs and forth, it's a pretty loyal adaptation. And having watched it recently, yesterday, it's amazing how much Peter Jackson either nodded to that film or just straight up stole shots from it, because there are a lot of scenes that are almost identical to Ralph Bakshi's version. But I love it. The Lord of the Rings, as far as I'm concerned, Peter Jackson did a wonderful job. So that is, to me, the definitive and its complete version. So I think it's a little dated now and obviously incomplete, but for what it was a good adaptation, and I really enjoyed it when I was a kid. Porg Lord.
I enjoyed it for the most part. Like you said, I felt like it was fairly loyal to the books. The animation just switching back and forth like it did was a little jarring to me, because I really hadn't seen the movie. Like I said, I'd seen a few clips here and there, and most of it I think was more the animated stuff. So the kind of the live action stuff was a little bizarre to me. But I felt like the way they kind of portrayed the characters, or the way they animated them, was a little bit more loyal. Um, Especially like with Gimli, and the elves in particular. I really did not like the way they portrayed the elves in the Hobbit version. They didn't really look like elves to me. They were just like some sort of weird, almost like bug creature. Um, but no, I enjoyed it. It would have been nice, I think, if they would have been able to finish it all and do all three books. But no, for the most part, I enjoyed it. Draco?
The Lord of the Rings, I thought was an extremely faithful adaptation of the story. You have all the different characters there. Boromir was more of a Viking, which I really didn't wasn't expecting. Since he came from Gondor, he was crown prince of. He was the son of Denethor, the steward of Gondor, and yet he's wearing fur wraps and loincloths, and he's got a big axe, and he's got a Viking helmet with the two horns, kind of like your avatar there, Taurus, coming out the sides of his helmet. So
Indeed.
that was a little off-putting for me personally, since he came from one of the last bastions of civilized humans in the area. Um, the animation style I thought was a little discomforting from time to time, but it worked really well for the Nine Riders, because no matter what, whenever you saw the Nine Riders, or whether you saw them within their hoods or on their horses, you'd always see the red of their eyes, and everything else would be silhouetted to black, but you'd always see the red of their eyes, and that just added a creepy factor to it, which was I appreciated very very much so. Like you said, Taurus, it seems that Peter Jackson drew a lot of his inspiration directly, almost in some of these cases, shot for shot from the this version. In fact, I'm going to share uh, screen cap this particular
Mm-hmm.
scene right here. It happened almost directly as it was in this movie.
Yep.
Peter Jackson recreated it. I'm not certain if he went to his production group and said, "Hey, watch this movie and try to make this happen." But it I don't I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it quite a bit.
Yeah, your point about the Nine Riders, those growing up and watching that, I always got a sense of unease when they were on the screen. They creeped the hell out of me. And even watching it yesterday, the way they shuffled around and their limbs were at kind of odd angles to their body, just really really creepy. And when you see them when Frodo has the ring on, and when you see like the live action versions of them when they have these strange helmets on, is very bizarre as well. So I think they really nailed the Nine Riders. But we forgot to talk about the song, the Glenn Yarbrough song from The Hobbit. Porglore, did you want to sing that?
Is it from The Hobbit or is it the one from The
No,
Return
no,
of the King?
The Hobbit. The Great Adventure.
I think the ones from The Return of the King just were so much more spectacular that it made me forget about that one.
All
That's
right.
true.
So I think that we've put the Lord of the Rings to bed. So let's move on to the Return of the King. Taurus, the Return of the King was once again back to the Rankin Bass style of animation. Um, so we have hello, Moto.
Hello. Sorry, my bad. That
No
was
worries.
my alarm for this video that
Oh,
I.
okay.
I'm here though. I didn't miss it.
Excellent, excellent. But we went back to the Rankin Bass style of animation after Ralph Bakshi was not able to finish. So what were your thoughts on the Return of the King?
So for whatever reason, Bakshi's budget was like 4 million, and I think it made 30 million, which is a nice profit. So I'm not really sure. I've kind of heard conflicting views. I was kind of reading Wikipedia yesterday. It seems like that was supposed to be volume one of two volumes, and they marketed it as Lord of the Rings without the volume one title. So I'm not really sure what the story is as to why. I originally thought he ran out of money, but that's kind of not what I read yesterday. It just the second volume never got made, despite turning a profit. But the Rankin Bass company ended up finishing it for whatever reason, and it was called Return of the King. It came out in 1980, and so you revert back to the Rankin Bass style of animation. I did not know about this movie growing up. I didn't know about it until probably 2010 or 12. Um, and stumbled across it somewhere and ordered it. I watched it at the time and I didn't remember much about it until watching it yesterday. And so the three of us had gotten together to watch all three of these back to back to back. And there was very little talking, very little discussion through The Hobbit and through Lord of the Rings. And I think we spent the entire of The Return of the King mocking this scrap of a cartoon. There was a 30-minute intro sequence. And then you talk about a musical. For the ring of doom.
Frodo, oh, the 9 fingers and the ring of doom. Why does he have 9 fingers? And where is the ring of doom? Yeah.
That's pretty good. You got the
Oh.
in there. Yeah, what anyway, I'm assuming since this came out in 1980, they started working on it after Bakshi had come out. I would assume, but they left out Shelob, which is one of my favorite, and I think one of the most iconic scenes from Lord of the Rings. Not to mention a huge plot movement. I mean, that's where Frodo gets the ring taken, and his. I mean, that so much happens with that Shelob piece and Gollum betraying them, and it was just left out. It was just ignored. There was no Legolas, no Gimli at all in this bit. It was mostly Sam fantasizing about being a king. It was just a mess. Like the plot was very disjointed. The animation was similar to The Hobbit, so I didn't really have a problem with that. Aragorn doesn't show up until the very end. I mean, the Return of the King is about Aragorn. Um, I just think it was a complete misfire. And I mean, the song, that Photo of the 9 Fingers song, just kept popping up like every 5 minutes. Like it was a disaster. And I hope I never have to see it again. I'm giving my copy to Porg Lord. What do you think about it, Porg?
Uh, it just was a horrible end to watching all three of these movies. Just like you said, it was just like it starts out kind of like with a little bit of a recap, which is fine. Catch me up, let me know what's going on. But like you said, it was just like it just kind of kept going and going and going, and it was like like you said, you're 30 minutes into watching this before it actually kind of you actually start actually getting the story, and then like you said, it skips so much. And I don't know, and like you said, it was all about. It seemed like Sam wanted to be the main character, and it was just a lot of unnecessary singing and characters with extremely large noses. I don't know if somebody just has like a nose fetish or something when they were drawing this. But yeah, like you said, I mean, like when we watched the first two, it was, we were watching it, and, there's a few comments like, oh, I like this, I like that, or, they kind of skipped this. And, but in this one here, it was just like, what? Really? And then just mocking the songs. And it just was a really bad end to what could have been a good series to cover The Hobbit.
Yeah, it turned into complete tomfoolery there at the end.
I don't know if Yardborough had a clause in the contract that he had to sing so many songs or have so many minutes of singing in the movie. Draco.
He had an appearance in the movie. I've got it right here. Look, here he is. His appearance.
That's him.
He's got the biggest nose out of anyone. So it's his show of dominance.
I don't know. Sam's was right there for a while too.
Well, I mean, we've got Sam there too, but Sam is a much smaller creature, so his nose is large in proportion to his face, but it does not measure up to that. I mean, that is a toucan Sam beak right there. So the animation style, which was difficult to say the least. There's we have the ring wraiths of the Return of the King.
Yeah.
And whereas the ring wraiths in the Lord of the Rings, they were ominous. They were that you couldn't see them, you couldn't make out what their shape was. You kind of had to fill in the blanks. It played more against your imagination and added to the creepy factor of it. And then you go back to Return of the King, and you have these banshee like things until you get to the Witch King of Angmar. He looks kind of cool, but the other ones were just it was jarring. So we had the Lord of the Rings. It went almost a third of the way through the two towers, but then the other 2/3 of the two towers is just gone. It fell away into the mists of time, like Sauron tried to multiple times. And when we get into the Return of the King, we immediately, as you said, we get to Sam going over his desire, his daydreaming of becoming the Lord of Mordor, turning Mordor into a splendid, verdant vale of green, and turning all the orcs into woodland creatures. Um, and leaving Frodo to be horribly tortured and whipped for another 2 or 3 hours.
That was ridiculous.
Wow. He's like, oh no, there's still too many of them there and they're fighting each other. I'm going to let them kill each other while they're torturing Mr. Frodo, and I will come back after they've all killed each other and Mr. Frodo is good and thoroughly tortured. We don't want to spare him any of that torture. Um, and so it just there were issues. I liked the animation style of Elrond in this variation. Now the Hobbit, the woodland elves kind of almost seemed like somehow goblins are sometimes depicted. They were green and uh, very very nasty looking. I like this depiction of Elrond, but you were right in the fact that the Return of the King was very much focused on Sam and Frodo. The invasion of Gondor, kind of an afterthought. The death of Theoden, kind of an afterthought. The where's Aragorn? Well, he kind of shows up at the very end on a boat, um, and kind of an afterthought. He shows up at the very end and has a chat with the mouth of Sauron, kind of an afterthought. Um, and Sauron himself, his tower is destroyed and he is banished into the kind of an afterthought. But no, it was this focused almost entirely on this journey between Frodo and Samwise. You didn't even see Gollum again until the very, very end, which would be accurate for the Return of the King. But I tell you what, we had way, way, way too much of, and that is where there's a whip, there's a way. Where there's a whip, there's a way. And I definitely can do without that moving forward.
The thing is, there was so much wasted time in that movie. Like they cut out so many things that were important for the sake of, like, how long was that where there's a whip, there's a way? How long did that go on? I mean, several minutes.
At least like 5 to 7 minutes.
Eowyn shows up out of nowhere. You have no idea who she is. She just appears. Um, Gollum shows up at the very end. You have no idea that he's been following them or how he got into Mordor. He just shows up. And of course, you take out that huge plot point with Shelob, and that really kind of the rest of it funnels down. But the Witch King of Angmar, take away from him. Do you remember the voice? Hello, He-Man, we meet again. That was
I am Skeletor, ruler of all Eternia. Yes.
Yeah, it was completely Skeletor, that voice, and it was just so much of this was so laughable. And after watching the first two, which are very respectable adaptations, it was just a joke. However, I did enjoy watching this just with you fellows' company, just because it was so comedic. It was so bad, it was funny.
They put so much effort to show Frodo and Samwise as the best of friends going through this horrible thing. But part of one of the biggest aspects of their relationship is when Frodo is attacked by Shelob and Samwise drives her off. he thinks that Frodo's dead, and so he believes that the quest has now fallen onto his shoulders. So he takes the vial of starlight, he takes Sting, he takes the ring of power, and he's willing to move on at that point. But he's unable to get Frodo's mithril shirt off before the orcs from the nearby tower come and collect him. And when Samwise is listening from the shadows, he realizes Frodo is not alive. He has only been paralyzed by Shelob. He has not yet been devoured. He's not been killed yet. And that's when he resolves he's going to go get Frodo back. He's going to rescue him from this tower no matter what it takes. And it just takes him that long to get to the tower in the books that by the time he gets there, the orcs have fallen out fighting over this shirt so much that there's all but a handful of them are dead, and Sam is able to either run off or kill the remaining ones. In this adaptation, Samwise just kind of like, oh, where'd Mr. Frodo go? He's gone. I've lost Mr. Frodo. And oh, here's his sting, and here's his ring. Funny, it's on the ground right beside each other. Oh, he must be up at the tower. I will get you back, shaking his fist at the sky. Mr. Frodo, as soon as I let the orcs kill each other and with you for another couple hours, you say it was a misfire. I say it was a fumble. It, I, the direction was completely wrong on this movie.
Yeah, it was bad, but I
Well,
enjoy. I got some humor out of it. What were you saying, Porg?
well, I feel like a lot of the disappointment. I mean, just from the direction that they went, it was the fact that these are the same people that had done the Hobbit movie, and we all enjoyed the Hobbit movie, and then for them to turn in this product, it's dumbfounding. I think that just amplifies the kind of the disappointment that you have. It's like they did such a good job with the Hobbit, and we enjoyed that, and then it's like, oh, okay, well now we're gonna they did the Return of the King, this will be good, and then you're like, what the f,
Where's
this
the
is
disconnect?
yeah, it's like, what happened? Were you like bitter that you didn't get to do the first part of the Lord of the Rings, so now you're just like, well, let's just turn in the biggest travesty that we can, because we're bitter about it. I don't know. It's just
We need to contact the animators, guys.
yeah.
We
So
need to
so
have them on the channel.
we need another
Yeah,
email out.
I'm working. Yeah, I'm sending it right now.
All right, sounds good. Well, gentlemen, then I think it's time to give our overall ratings for the movie. Let's start with the animated Hobbit. Taurus, thumbs up, thumbs down.
I'm gonna give it my A to F rating, like I normally do. Mostly, but like Porg said, that they kind of missed the dwarves and the elves. But they captured the spirit of the story very well. There was a bit much singing, but I felt like a lot of the scenes were a bit truncated and moved a little fast. But I'm gonna give it a B plus. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed watching it again as an adult, um, and I think it stands up. So yeah, B plus for me. Porg.
I'd go with the B plus. I'm kind of along the same lines as you. I mean, they were faithful for the most part. I think if they would have just done a little bit better with their depiction of the dwarves and the elves, I think it would have been a little bit more truer, more loyal to the source material. Drago?
I'm actually going to go ahead and give it an A minus because you guys are forgetting the sound effects when Frodo when the Bilbo puts on the ring. Ew, whoop, ew, whoop. So I'm gonna go with an A minus on this just for those sound effects.
Wow,
Um,
that pushed it into the A. That's most impressive.
it is indeed. Taurus, what's your A to F on the Lord of the Rings?
Man, they didn't finish it. That's a huge, huge misfire for me. And had there been a follow up by that same production company, it would be a totally different story. But as it is, it was faithful through what they adapted. The animation was clunky in parts though, shifting back and forth from the live action to the animation. But the ring wraiths were incredibly scary. Gandalf, when he got pissed, lightning struck behind him. Like, you didn't want to f with that dude. So I'm gonna give this one a B minus. Porglord.
I'm gonna go with just a straight B. The animation, going back and forth between like I said, the live action animated stuff and then just the pure animation, it 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 was a little too jarring for me. I mean, especially like it probably took me at least half the movie to kind of, get over that. So it just was kind of disconnected a little bit. But and then I guess maybe there wasn't enough singing. Maybe that really is my problem with it. But no. I think a lot of it was just the animation style, the trying to switch back and forth. Draco.
Well, I'm gonna have to give it a B plus, and that's because of Glorfindel. Glorfindel does not get enough love, as we mentioned during the watch. Whereas in this case, Glorfindel got his full representation, and we were
No,
able to.
no, he didn't.
He did not. Oh wait, no, it was
No,
Legolas.
it was Legolas.
Oh my
Because
gosh.
that was me saying that, hey, they put Glorfindel in here, but I was wrong. It was Legolas. So
That's
I'm
right. He
going
was
to have to
called out.
revisit that. Yeah.
I've got
So
to
no love.
revisit that scoring process. That's going to bump it down to a B. As you said, they didn't finish it. It was mismarketed as The Lord of the Rings and not Lord of the Rings Part 1 or Lord of the Rings 2 out of 5. It was Lord of the Rings, and it was not the complete story. So it gets knocked down a whole letter grade to B max B. And I'm going to have to leave it there. It has a few little bits which I wasn't completely happy with, the huge nose on Samwise, but in the same case, it was the inspiration almost for shot for a lot of what we got from Peter Jackson. So I've got to give it props for that. Without that movie, Peter Jackson's movie would not have been as good as it was, I would say. So I'm going to leave it as a B, solid B. So Taurus, A to F for The Return of the King.
Well, hold on real quick. So we all know what Peter Jackson did with The Hobbit. Okay, it was disastrous for the most part. Now, the sets and the casting, all that was great, but the story was a flop. Maybe he shouldn't be getting credit for Lord of the Rings at all. Maybe Ralph Bakshi should be getting credit for the direction of Lord of the Rings. I don't know, just a thought. But the Return of the King. I'm trying to sit here and think of something positive about it.
You love the rhyming scheme of the songs. You know you do.
Frodo of the nine. I'm gonna hit my throat when I do that. Of the nine fingers.
You
And
did
the
love the vibrato that he was getting.
I know. I'm jealous of it. Like, I have to hit my throat with my and the ring of doom. Was that it? Was that closer?
That's closer, yeah.
Closer.
I'm gonna have to work on it, guys. I did enjoy watching it in the company of others. It was fun because it was so hilarious, but that was unintended. F minus. This thing was a joke. It was not. It defecated on the source material. It was confusing. It had a 30-minute lead in. The entire Gondor plot was excised essentially. Then they dropped in the afterthoughts as Draco said. So this for me was just a disaster. F minus. Porglord.
I'm probably gonna go with probably a solid D. I like to reserve the F for some sort of other epic failure. Something that might have like Last or Jedi in the title. But anyway, yeah, there was just so much of the plot that they just decided not to do or just skip over. Like I said, there's no Legolas, there's no Gimli. You don't see Faramir. The whole scene with in Gondor. Just some of it didn't make sense on what was going on. Merry and Pippin, they're the stewards for Gondor, and Rohan. They don't tell you anything about that. It's just there was just so much of the plot that was missing. I can't good conscience give it any kind of passing grade. Draco?
Well, I'm gonna have to also give it a D, and not because of reserving. Okay, yes, I would reserve an F or an F minus for something that just completely goes out to destroy the source material. Whereas here we did have a return of Gollum. We did have a return of some of the plot from Frodo and from Sam. So obviously, I don't know if they maybe just didn't take the time to read the entire Lord of the Rings up to the Return of the King, and they just read the Return of the King and decided, well, a lot of this stuff doesn't make sense without the rest of it, so we'll just put in stuff that makes sense to compartmentalize it into one story. I would give it a solid D for delightfully hilarious, and D for disgustingly incomplete. So that's going to have to be my final score for that.
Yeah, I think our biggest takeaway is for the next 2 weeks when we're sitting around each other, it'll be Frodo of the Nine Fingers.
And the Ring of Doom.
Yes. And where did it go? We don't know.
No. All right, gentlemen, I think we've said all that can be said in regards to Tolkien's animated universe in cinematic form. Do you have any last thoughts you'd like to give before we call this a wrap? Taurus?
He's muted himself and he doesn't even know it.
Taurus,
oh
how dare
man,
you?
I've been sitting here singing for 10 minutes.
Well, it's probably a good thing that you muted yourself then.
Oh yeah.
But now his larynx is going to be bruised for no reason at all.
Yeah. Now I've lost my voice. Final words: where there's a whip, there's a way. That's all I got.
Is that a threat?
Or a promise. One of the two.
Oh boy.
Whichever one pleases you.
Porglord, final thoughts.
Watch the first two, skip the third one.
Sounds
all
like
I've got.
Sounds good to me. I'd say read the books.
Amen to that.
I mean, the animated, I'd say the animated Hobbit, definitely worth it. If you have a child who is interested in the Hobbit, go ahead and have them give it a watch. Yes, it is truncated, but it is shortened for a child's attention span, and I think that works. As for the Lord of the Rings, it is a much more the material's meant for a more mature audience. So if they're old enough, have them read the book. Read the book to them. If not, then let them discover this treasure and travesty at their own pace. So, everyone, again, thank you for joining us here at the Legacy Guard. We ask that you, if you enjoyed, please go ahead and like and subscribe. And remember, be kind.
Live long and prosper.
And poor Lord,
may the force be with you.